And so what I think and what I believe hockey needs to move towards is a more democratic model. Um, we need to contextualize why we play ice hockey, and that's something that extends beyond just the trans community or the gay community or the lesbian community or anyone who meets within that. Everyone needs to ask themselves, why do I come to the rink every day? You know, what's the point of this game? What are we doing here? And I think that what's so special and unique about ice hockey is that it's a really wonderful arena for us to practice democracy. Hi, everyone, or anyone who is watching. I'm Aidan, Aidan Cleary. I am living in New York City, and I'm the co-founder of Team Trans Ice Hockey. And I think that's the only thing anyone would know or get to know me for in the hockey world. So yeah.
Very cool, and it's a very cool team that you've created and such a wonderful initiative. How did Aiden get into hockey?
Oh yeah. So I'm from the San Francisco Bay Area. And in the 90s, the beginning of the 90s, I was born in the mid 90s, but in the beginning of the 90s, San Jose was awarded a new NHL franchise. And my parents were living in San Francisco. And so they had tickets frequently to go see the San Jose Sharks play at the old Cow Palace. So my parents went and they started playing adult hockey. And so they started picking it up. And both my parents were players, and they're both USA hockey coaches as well. And so then when I was about 2 years old, I had my skates tied up. And then at 4, I was out playing hockey with sticks. So yeah, I grew up kind of in the under the wing of the San Jose Sharks in a small town about 2 hours north of San Jose called Santa Rosa, California. And then after a while, I ended up moving to San Jose and playing hockey there. But yeah, that was kind of how it started. And yeah, from about 4 years old on, I played hockey and haven't really stopped. 22 years later now.
Very cool. What do you love about it?
Well, it's hockey's fun. You know, I like the base of it is that it's fun. But it's fun because it's a place where I can be creative. I think that what's so fun about playing hockey, whether it's ice or roller or street or whatever it is that it's a different challenge every single play you make, every little moment. And through practices, through games, we acquire a lot of, you know, this is what you're supposed to do in this moment. But what makes the game really fun and what leads to goals, what leads to a lot of excitement is when you choose to do something different and you express yourself creatively on the ice. And that's what I really enjoy, is when I get to be playing and just like creatively making creative plays, you know, and playing with people who are creative hockey players. And then when you get into that energy, you're just bouncing off of each other. You know, it feels like, I work in the theater, and it feels a lot like doing a really good play when you're playing hockey the right way. You know, everyone just bounces. The energy is really cool.
Yeah, I totally feel that, and it makes a lot of sense. I've never heard it put that way, but it resonates with me. Though you obviously love the sport, based off your intersection of identities, how could the sport be better for you? And also, how could it be better for the queer community?
Yeah. This is kind of a complicated question, so I'll try and downsize it a bit. I think that I myself, as a member of the trans community and as a longtime hockey fan player, often have a tendency to downsize the issues of hockey. And a lot of the times, like, I grew up in a time when it was pretty normal to be like called a fag, you know, things like that were really common. Uh, and they were all symptoms of greater issues that were going on, or greater challenges for the game. And so I think for the game to advance and for it to become inclusive, but not just grow as an inclusive sport, but as one that is really useful for society, we need to be looking at the sport as something a lot bigger than what it is right now. And so what I think and what I believe hockey needs to move towards is a more democratic model. Um, we need to contextualize why we play ice hockey, and that's something that extends beyond just the trans community or the gay community or the lesbian community or anyone who meets within that. Everyone needs to ask themselves, why do I come to the rink every day? You know, what's the point of this game? What are we doing here? And I think that what's so special and unique about ice hockey is that it's a really wonderful arena for us to practice democracy. Every time we come to the rink, it's a cooperation between several different communities. You know, it's often two different towns, sometimes two different countries, people, parents, children who are working in tandem to come together to cooperate, to put on a game, and then the two opponents play against each other, but they're cooperating. Without these two different communities, there wouldn't be a game. And so when we look at ice hockey in that way, we start to see an arena for democratic culture, where we can practice in a low stakes environment all of the challenges and the ideas that we are going to face in the world when we get off the ice. And so I think, to me, it's about refocusing our mindset and looking at ice hockey as more of a place to practice those skills, to build peace, to cooperate, to work together, not to create some utopian society that's out of reach, but to create something that's very real and tangible. You know, I think that's one of the things that's so heartening about hockey, and one of the things why like I love to stay so involved, even though like I don't play competitively anymore. But I love hockey because it's really, really close to this. And I think a lot of times when people talk about hockey or when people hear criticisms about hockey, they imagine that like I want a different culture that isn't here yet, that isn't near, that we're not already knocking on. But when I look at USA Hockey, when I look at Hockey Canada, when I look at hockey in Sweden and Finland, a lot of the practices that are in play are democratic in nature. A lot of these organizations just haven't figured out the language to contextualize it. And I think that's why, like, as someone in the theater, I'm a director and learning to produce, and my whole existence is about contextualizing. Why are we here? Why are we coming to the theater? And that's why I think the similarity between theater and hockey is so important, because we need to understand why are we here. When we understand that we're here to interact with each other, to give each other an equitable economic, social experience, that we are together creating a democratic society on the ice and then carrying those skills out of it to build a peaceful, really functioning society, then we can get to something really special. And as a byproduct of that, you get everything that we're looking for. You know, you get LGBT inclusion. You know, you start to handle racial issues. You know, racism can start to be addressed then. So yeah, I think what's very exciting is that we're really close to that. We already have so many things that we do, like handshakes after the game. You know, whatever it is, that kind of stuff. We just don't know how to put it all into a greater frame of reference to convince people and talk to people. That's something like in the American development model, they have a really tough time convincing coaches about how to teach kids a new style that they've been trying to integrate since I think 2011, 2009 is when the ADM came out. And like I'm a USA hockey coach, and the last training session I had, I was amazed by how often coaches were focused on respect, you know, and they were all saying, well, this is about teaching these kids respect, you know, and and I was really confused because you don't teach people respect. You know, they respect you or they don't. You show them that you care for them. You give them a voice. You uplift the best of their qualities, and you work on what you can about the worst of their qualities. You know, and that's how you earn people's respect. So I think there are a lot of like semi-authoritarian hangovers left in American culture, and from what I see from a lot of other hockey cultures as well, that we need to shift out of to be able to deal with these issues. And I think until we look at a greater picture and a greater context, we're going to really struggle to deal with a lot of the LGBT issues that we see. You know, we can root out the language, we can get people to, you know, stop saying the 3-letter F word or whatever, you know, calling people other, you know, bad names. But that's not going to change the behaviors. That's not going to change the thoughts behind it. So we need to root into those. And I think that democracy is the context that we need to provide in order to do that.
I love that. It is obviously you've critically analyzed this culture a lot. And I already knew that. We've had the conversations, right? But it's so nice to see and refreshing to see in a, you know, and put into words for others. And I'm excited for people to see that. With that said, and knowing where it actually is today, what keeps you in hockey?
Yeah. You know, it's really interesting being a trans person who passes as cis. You know, like I've played boys or men's hockey all my life, and you know, I still do. And most of the time, like my teammates don't know that I'm trans because no one looks you up or whatever, or, you know, follows you on social because you're just like drinking beers and playing hockey or whatever. And it is amazing what I hear people say, not knowing that there's someone in the room, you know, even in 2021. So it can be a challenge, but what keeps me around is the vision for the future and knowing that we're not that far. And to me, the basic understanding that I like all my teammates. I've never had a teammate that I really didn't like, you know. I've had teammates that I knew not to be around, you know, but there was something valuable in every teammate I ever had. And I think that if we all can look to see that, if a lot of people who are not on the outside margins of society can meet us halfway in understanding that, then we're not really far from something really special. You know, so aside from just the fact that I love to play and I like to express myself on the ice through the way that I play center, uh, I know that we're close. We're really, really close to breaking through to something. We just need the right context to do that.
So true. It sort of leads me into my next question. What gives you hope for queer people going forward?
I think the fact that you and I are alive gives me a lot of hope for queer people moving forward. This is something that I was talking about recently with someone, and I think like, I don't know how much you personally felt this, but a big difference between our generation and the generation behind us is that we're still alive. And the leaders, the outspoken folks amongst us are still alive. And that wasn't the case for us. You know, as a trans person, it's really weird because a lot of people think it's a fad because they don't see older trans people, you know. But the AIDS crisis happened, you know, and all of the people that should have been leading the way for us couldn't, you know. They passed away. You know, I had family members that I didn't ever get to meet who were queer and died of AIDS, you know. And it's very selfish to say, but like, I'm sad for me about that in a lot of ways, because that should have been mentorship that I had going through a really, a very tough world. I didn't know that I was trans until I was 20 years old. You know, I knew I was really, really different than everyone that I played with in some way. But I knew I wasn't necessarily gay, you know, and I didn't know what to make of that. And no one told me that. I had only ever seen trans people who were like in movies and they weren't really trans. It was like men in dresses who were supposed to be ugly, you know. And I never saw any humanized trans person. And it was literally, I was 20 years old. I saw Hedwig and Angry and on Broadway. And it was the first time I ever saw like a non-binary character who was a human. And she was super flawed. She was an asshole, you know, but she was bitter. And she was bitter about the things that had been taken away from her. And she was talking about it. And I was like, oh, you know, this is like, this means something to me. I feel bitter about this, but I don't understand why, you know, and sad. And I think that a lot of that pain comes from the AIDS crisis and the fact that it wasn't contained to the 80s and the 90s or even the early 2000s, you know, that took away an entire generation of leaders from us, and that impacted us. That set us back 100 years. And so now you and I and a lot of other wonderful people, and some people who are very lucky to survive from that generation as well, are here and making changes, you know. But we should be building off of more that was left for us, you know. And I feel really hopeful for the next generation because ours is here, you know, and we're alive, so far at least, fingers crossed. And we're able to push. We're able to be like the kind of toxic, like weirdo in the locker room who doesn't know how to handle the things that are different about themselves, so that we can work through those problems now, so that generations in the future don't have to. We can work through that and take it out into society and do something about it, so that that next generation doesn't have to deal with that. They can start where every other, you know, non-queer person starts, having some sense of who they are, knowing and feeling comfortable in who they are in a really base, simple way. And I found, like, as a trans person, when I got to a certain point in my life and I realized, like, oh, I'm not a man, I was like, well, I had 20 years of thinking that that was right. So what else do I not know about myself? You know? And then you go through what feels like a whole other puberty, which I feel like I'm just getting out of, where you have to figure out every little detail about yourself that you thought was true, you know, and you realize almost all of it isn't. Almost all of it is conforming to something, an idea of yourself that's set out by other people, or I did at least. And so my hope and my drive is that other people don't do that. The next generations don't start there. They start where we started whenever we came out, you know.
Love that so much, and it resonates with me. There's a few queer folks that I will vent to sometimes, and within this space, and I'll be like, I'm done. I'm leaving. I'm just gonna focus on queer youth. I'm gonna focus on other aspects of it. I can't stand hockey. And I'll get texts back, and this one person in particular always sends me something, if not you, then who? And so to your point, if not us, because people before us couldn't, then who? The next,
Yeah,
we're going to leave that trauma for the next group.
yeah. And that was taken away from them, you know.
Yes.
It's not just that they couldn't, it's that it was taken. It
Well,
didn't
yeah.
have to be that way. And then obviously, like, when we say us, we mean like the, you know, there are tons of people doing this, you know,
Yes.
and talking about this kind of stuff. But yeah, it's true. We have to do it, you know. It's another moment where the burden for change falls on us to clean up, you know. um and it adds another layer to the starting point that we have, you know. Another layer of like, well, this is another thing that we have to deal with that a lot of non-queer people just don't, you know. Yeah, it has to get done. We have to make changes and developments. You know, I can't tell you how many you know, people of all ages I know who are queer, who are depressed or were depressed severely, suicide rates, you know, it's just like, I think sometimes I see some people with ideas about what it means to be queer or trans who don't understand that people's lives are at stake. You know, actual human beings' lives are at stake. And there are a lot of people that, you know, I don't want to be the first to take X step. You know, I don't want to be the first to condemn X or to talk in support of X. And for a lot of those people, those things aren't real. You know, our humanity isn't real yet. And it's painful too, because I find a lot of those people are the ones who come to you a few years down the line and are like, my kid just came out, what do I do? You know, and it's like, okay, well, 3 years ago or 5 years ago, or, you know, whatever, like this came up and you didn't do anything, you know? So yeah, it starts with recognizing recognizing humanity, you know, and just that like we exist, you know, and that it's not like liberal wokeness or something to talk about LGBT rights and reforming our society to make it stronger for LGBT people and other communities as well that are suffering. It's literally our lives at stake. So anyway, cheers to us surviving so far.
I couldn't agree more. And I'm hoping this interview series helps people recognize that we're here and we're not going away, and we are taking up space within this hockey world. We're going to continue to grow and find our spaces. And you know what? If you want to grow the game, make it safe and equitable for us, because it matters. Aidan, thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely.
This was so powerful.
Yeah. Do you mind if I just say one thing
Of course.
that you might not use or anything like that? I think the last number I saw was 20% of Gen Z is the next generation below us, right? 20% of Gen Z identify as LGBTQ in some way. That means that 20% of our hockey teams are LGBTQ. As someone who has grown up playing hockey since the age of 4, I can pretty confidently say that that number held up for every single team I was on. Knowing what I know now, I absolutely had 3 to 5 queer hockey players on every single team I was on, if not way more, that were just really on a spectrum, you know? So I think it's important to note that we're there. In the NHL, we're there. There are probably lesbian women in the NHL right now. I think mathematically there are like 7 trans people in the NHL right now, and that probably holds. It's probably more than that, you know. It's real. We're here, you know, and it's not just at the NHL level. When you're a coach, when you're a manager, when you're a parent of a hockey kid, 20% chance that your kid is LGBT, QIA plus. 20% chance that one of the kids that you're coaching is, or that 4 or 5 of the kids that you're coaching is. So if you're not ready to handle those discussions, you're not ready to step behind the bench. We need you to be ready. Kids, students need you to be ready to lead them. Yeah, that was all I wanted to say on that. But I feel like that just doesn't, like, no one ever talks about it. It's always so like, oh, you know, queer people are out there. But then it's like, no, we are like, wherever you are in the hockey community, we're there. We're already there. They're too afraid. They don't know. I think that's the other thing, is people have no idea how often we go through life just not knowing, like knowing something is off, but having no idea what it is. And there are so many people out there too that deny the gray areas of gender and sexual orientation. You know, there are bisexual people, there are non-binary people like myself, you know, And there are so many kids and adults too that have no idea that you don't have to be all one thing. We are already here. We're already there.
So well said. Thank you, Aidan.
Right. So
I-
sorry for
No, it's
hanging you
great.
on for another 7 minutes.
No, that's okay. Thank you so much.